All right, everybody. So I thought I had to come in to discuss this case with you guys. Um, I'm speechless at the end of this thing that the state actually proceeded with this case. The parallels. I'm gonna take my jacket off here. The parallels between this case and the Ty Tucker case down in Florida, in terms of the prosecution proceeding with literally no evidence, is startling. But we got to see what happens when you have an attorney who comes in and makes an argument. Now, I would have liked to have seen more focus on. I would like to have seen more focus on the lack of, or more focus on the fact that the state had a burden to prove here, and that the presumption of innocence always lies. First of all, the case begins from that point. And this is the type of case that when you have rumor, innuendo, speculation, hearsay, it's it, and you put that up against the presumption of innocence, and you have the conflicts you have with evidence, the problems you have with evidence, the problems and issues that are um, present in this case. The presumption of innocence is where we turn to settle those things. And that's what I would have loved to have seen more of a discussion of. Now, I understand the passion from the defensive side is like, this is a case that should have never been brought. This is a garbage case. But it's very important that these jurors, the thing that happens when you have defense attorneys and people that are really involved closely with the case is they forget that these people were not involved that way. These people are not familiar with the justice system. These people don't know how it's supposed to work. And you've got to make sure you educate them on that. Now, I don't know what happened during jury instructions or not instructions, jury selection, and I don't know what the discussions were then. But I felt like, to me, they needed to discuss that, because when you put that up and you say she walked in this courtroom, like in order for this case to work, in my opinion, you have to walk into the courtroom and you have to presume her guilty. And then you have to say she's got the burden to disprove that. So then you put all this speculation and all this innuendo and all these things that have to happen. And that's why when the prosecutor stands up and says, that's just life. No, it's not. When you have buffalo heads that are falling apart, that's not life. That's a doubt. That means that when there's a problem there, you don't just say, well, Cybertrucks are falling apart. No, you look at it and you say, is that reasonable? Is that reasonable that we have a witness who says a man meeting the description of Dylan is running from the scene? We have a knife similar to one that he says he had. We have a characteristic about that knife that's present, things that he couldn't have known, things that he acknowledges were true. We have a male DNA on the knife. Now, we can't answer those questions, and the defense isn't there to do that. But because we can't answer those questions, you can't convict her of anything, regardless of the justice you want. Which justice is, again, I think it's always funny how we always talk about this thing called justice. There's no such thing as justice. I saw that discussion, and that's the whole point of this, of why this channel's named what it was. It was my dad's point, because my dad would get asked, how can you represent people that kill people, that do things to children, and isn't that? And he says no, because they're entitled to a fair process. They're not entitled to get off. They're not entitled to not serve prison time, but they're entitled to a process, a fair process. They're entitled to ensure their due process rights are respected. They're entitled to ensure that the rules of evidence are respected. They're entitled to say that even the most heinous of crimes means the detectives still need to make sure they're following the rules of evidence. They need to make sure that they're respecting your Bill of Rights. They need to be respecting the whole process, and that's what it's all about. So justice isn't the outcome, because it is not justice to have someone convicted under these circumstances. Even if she did it, that's not justice, because this case does not meet the standard needed to reach a conviction. And the injustice of it is that the prosecutors, and time again, we're seeing this in many cases that are out right now. The prosecutors are forgetting that they're not there to win in the sense of a guilty verdict. They are there. A win, it is as much a win for them if they either choose not to charge or they dismiss the charges, because in that sense, they're acknowledging that the case isn't ready for isn't it doesn't reach the level needed to convict someone, and then essentially take away their rights, take away their freedoms, warehouse them in a state prison. Um, well, Kate, we don't know why they did, and that's the problem. Nothing was said about that. But the way it should have been framed by the defense is we don't have to answer that. I didn't like the way the defense attorney handled that DNA by saying you'd be surprised who it was. To me, he should have been talking about whoever it wasn't, who wasn't tested, because that's the question. I mean, this defense team, he can put it off on whatever he wants, 7,000 pages or whatever, and maybe he was trying to look like there's so much here. I have to go through these reports, but to me, this was a case. Look, let's take one of the most high profile cases that we've had, right? And I guarantee you, if this particular attorney was involved in this case, not guilty would be assured 100%. That's the ASAP Rocky case with Joe Tacopina's famous 10 questions for the prosecution. 10 questions for a prosecution. This defense team should have had 10 questions ready to go. They should have had 20 questions ready to go. And they should have said, if you can't answer these questions, every one of these represents reasonable doubt. You need one, not 20. And if you got more than one, it's game over, acquittal, walk out of that room. Because there are so many questions, but they should have had that visual aid for the jury, had that up on a board, and said, and had their slideshows and went through 10 questions to throw back at the prosecutor. They can't possibly answer because they can't. And one of the questions is, whose DNA is under there? And well, yes, DNA isn't dated, but how many prosecutors, can you imagine if it would have been a male defendant sitting over there? They would have argued just like they did you have prosecutors in the Ty Tucker case arguing that inconclusive means something. This case is such a bad case. I mean, it's a wealth of things of how bad it is. Number one, I mean, you've got prosecutors endorsing witnesses that don't even have it right. The Glynn's. Let's talk about them for a second, right? Because a lot of people are putting a lot of credibility on the aunt, right, and the uncle, and that's what the state is kind of wanting to do, because they're like, oh, why would the aunt and uncle come against her? Well, here's the problem: the aunt doesn't know the color of the robe. It's misses the ball, but misses the ball by a year. A year. We're not talking about a month. We're not talking about a day. We're talking about an entire year. Yet she is so certain. I did like that. He did pound the hell out of her on that. A year, right? A year. So she's completely. And then you go, well, does she have memory issues? Yes, she had medical problems. She went through, and again, the state wants to, oh, you're calling her a drug addict. No, what we're saying is she was involved in something that absolutely affects your memory, whether the addiction, the painkillers that got a hold of her. Luckily, I'm glad to hear she took steps on that. That's exactly what should be happening. Um, it just makes no sense. Um, well, Babs, it doesn't mean she did it, right? That's the problem. Um, so it's it's just unbelievable. And then on top of that, you've got the aunt, right? And she is remembering things and testifying to things that she never even told the police. Look, and this is exactly what's happening with the aunt. So y'all can kind of understand what's happening with the aunt right now. Okay. And again, memory is a very, very, very delicate thing, right? Because memories change, memories can be influenced. There's a wealth, and I mean a wealth of research done on how bad memories are. I remember I took a criminal justice course, and one of the things they did for us, it was taught by a police officer, and he had us all sit down, and he had someone run into the classroom, right. We weren't expecting it, and then we had to write down what we saw, and it was amazing how I think I had like 40 or 50 people in my class, how different everyone's eyewitness statements were. We all saw the same thing, but we know that because we were all in the same class at the same moment it happened. But our statements, what happened, what we remembered about it, what he did, what he said, it was so different. And that's just like I said, when you're talking about memories being remembered or thought of right after something happens. This lady didn't do that. She didn't call the police right away. She's remembering things based on what she sees after she's approached by a documentary who's telling her that they're investigating her niece. We don't know, again, we don't know a lot of background because I'm sure some of that was kept out. But we don't know all the ins and outs of their relationship and what colored it. But what we do know is that whatever she said maybe made her feel uncomfortable, but it wasn't accurate. We don't know what it was, and we can't trust it. It was a year off. The robe was wrong, and the water in the bathroom, as was came out by the defense expert and was brought out by Miss Ash on investigator Asham's testimony. She was given a walkthrough 15 minutes afterwards. That water would have been in the bathroom. Not to mention that I'm surprised, of course, the defense doesn't necessarily need to, but what also could be suggested is what we don't know because Marty's not here. She lived in that apartment. She went back to that apartment. She moved out of that apartment. Are you going to tell me it's not possible that Marty O'Neill didn't come up to her and tell her what was going on, or that residents or people or Knapp wasn't talking about things? Didn't mention the screen, didn't mention various different things. There were people that knew things and rumors that were circulating. So there was nothing that was truly held back. And it's none of that. All of that is evidence that, yes, if you attach it to something else, physical evidence, DNA, where's the DNA? She leaves the knife behind, right? She's in such a rush, she's going to leave the knife behind, yet she's supposedly leaving, going up to her parents' farm. She clearly would have gotten rid of all the clothes she was wearing. She clearly would have gotten rid of the shoes she was wearing, but the knife, she leaves it behind, right? And then what? There's no DNA of her on that knife at all, of her handling it on a flip knife. Nothing. But there's male DNA on the knife. How does that? I mean, how does that happen? Let me see what some people are saying here. Let's take a look. So what we have here. So Bab says she called Anita B and C after she was murdered. Now, well, and look, um, just because someone dies doesn't mean that the problems they had or the feelings they had. I mean, listen, I'm not. No one is advocating and saying that this lady is a good person, right, or a nice person. What we're saying is that the evidence doesn't amount at this particular moment. It doesn't. That does not mean she killed the woman. That's a pretty huge jump to say, okay, well, she went and killed her. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Even that in and of itself does not make sense that she would, in under those circumstances, decide, okay, I'm going to kill her. The other thing that bothers me is they didn't tie in the knife. Where's the proof she ever had a folding knife like that? The only person that admitted that they had a folding knife that was similar was a guy who's breaking into houses all over her community, who is R-ing women all over the community. And the prosecutors are sitting here like, oh, yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, on that particular one. And he said he's not good at it. Yeah, he's not good at it. He gets caught. Well, guess what? If he got caught by her in the process of whatever he was doing, that's what resulted in him having to kill her. Right? That means he's not very good. We know that. Dude's not very good. He left his DNA behind. He was just doing what he does. He's not very good at it. Right? And I mean, I don't understand how a jury could even think of convicting her with those type of questions sitting around. Raunchy Dog says she remembered their shocking statements. Yes, she did, but she remembered statements, right? But the veracity of her memory, the ability for her to remember those statements is definitely in question. She forgot. She didn't get key things right. She didn't. The road color was wrong. The year it happened was wrong. And she was damn sure about it on the stand when she testified. Yet it was wrong. And her testimony can't be trusted. You can't rely on that. That's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a woman who can't be who thinks she remembered something, who thinks something was said, who got bad feelings because, well, she, again, remember, none of this stuff was said, or some of this stuff was not even said until years later, after she realizes that her niece is suspected, or that people are now believing that her niece did this. So she's coming back, and everyone's re-remembering things. Everybody's re-remembering what was said at the party in a drunken state, where she's allegedly, again, what I thought was really solid in a solid point that I hope the jury remembers is why would you go around confessing to all these people allegedly, Yet she's sitting in 5 police interviews, interrogated by the police, and she withstands that. She never once makes a slip up to them. Now, she doesn't keep her story straight because, that's difficult to do, I guess, sometimes. And again, that's a concerning thing. But she doesn't confess. She keeps it together. And then she just goes to parties and just starts talking to everybody and starts allegedly just really freely talking about how she did this. And, just absolutely collapses to the lady who takes her home. She's upset at the party that everyone's accusing her of doing this. And then she goes home and she says, "Oh, yeah, I did it." Why would you say that? This is just stuff that people are remembering and they're hearing and they're wanting to hear these things, but they never heard it. And then over time, as things went, they just decided they heard it. And the fact that if they actually heard it, just thought that they wouldn't have called the police. Now they're claiming they called the police, but where's the report? I mean, is Minot Police Department so incompetent that if they would have got a report on this lady that, or from these people that said, "Hey, she did this," that they just misplaced these reports? I don't think so. And then you've got, on top of that, you've got all these um, police officers who are so concerned about the behavior of Nichole Rice at the time of this happening that they let it sit for 15 years. That they didn't have time to investigate a stabbing of an 18-year-old girl in an apartment complex. It reminds me a lot of the Amanda Knox case and the way the prosecutors acted in that case. And they had Rudy Guade, right, who was a known thief, who's going around, who's breaking into houses. But the prosecutor said, no, it was the girl. It was the roommate. They were fighting. They were angry. They were mad. It didn't go quite as far as that case. But that's what this reminds me of. And it all happened at the same time. It's kind of funny. It's kind of chilling because it all happened around the same time that case happened. A few months before she had her situation occur, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was 2007. But it's just shocking to me that the prosecutors are going to sit here and ignore the fact that they have a guy who's running around doing these things in their community, and they're not going to think that, oh, this isn't the person who did it. And we're going to think that she goes, and again, the prosecutor wants to say it happened at 1. Their own medical examiner said it happened at 5 a.m. That's when they're saying it occurred. That's when her text messages stopped. And her people, or they accept the fact that she goes back to the farmhouse and ends up at the farmhouse in the morning. But we're to believe that she makes it back to this farmhouse, shows up there after she's committed this crime. No one's suspicious of it. She gets rid of all the clothes. She gets rid of all the evidence. There's nothing in her car. There's no blood in her car. There's nothing. There's no cuts on her fingers. She just goes in and boom, stabs her roommate twice because they're fighting over roommate stuff. It's ridiculous. And then there's no DNA. And there's nothing linking her. There's nothing linking her to the knife or the weapon that was used. And then let's not even get into Marty and Nell. Can they decide where the screen was at? Was it in the window or was it outside of the window? Because one of the things that I recall hearing, and I have to go back and re-listen to the openings, was I remember them trying to dispel the idea that he could have looked into the window and seen this, was because the screen was found 100 feet from the window, and that's where he found it. And that's what the defense expert was remembering. And then the prosecution comes along and says, no, it was in the window. It was in the window. Should they cut it? That's why. Or was it out of the window? Now, what makes sense to me, okay, is I don't think Marty and Nell did this. Here's what I believe actually happened. I think Dylan, or Devin or Dylan, I can't remember, man, I might be getting the name wrong. But I believe the guy who fits the description of the man running away with blood on his shirt, who had the buffalo head knife, etc. I believe that he did this, okay? And I believe that screen was on the ground. I believe that makes sense to why Marty didn't go and knock on the door like you would expect the maintenance man to. He didn't do the things you would expect the maintenance man to do if he observes this screen cut and goes and removes it and doesn't yell, it doesn't say something into the window that's open that he would have seen. and say, hey, ma'am, I'm sorry, I'm taking your screen. I'm not going to say a word about it. I remember when I lived in an apartment, they would put a little thing on your door and say, we did this. Maintenance arrived. They had to. It was in our lease. Don't know what was in their lease. But what makes more sense is that screen was busted out because that guy comes out of the window, busted out. Marty walks over and sees it. Now, Marty, hey, Marty's lazy. He sees this screen. Instead of doing his due diligence and investigating, he takes it, he goes to Laura Knapp, and they go and repair it. Now, what's weighing heavy on Marty's heart? He's thinking to himself, if I would have investigated that more, if I would have found out where the screen came from and looked a little deeper into this, could I have saved that young lady's life? That's what weighed on Marty, in my opinion. That's what weighed on his soul. And he did what he did 18 months later with that memory. And this young man who was going around doing exactly what happened in this case, was seen by an eyewitness. Police have it right there. And look, there's bad blood between two roommates, okay? But there's nothing to indicate that this roommate had access to a knife, carried a knife. Why would she be carrying a buffalo head knife? I love the whole Cybertruck. Oh, yeah, they all fall apart. Oh, they all fall apart, except the one knife that matches the knife that was in this man's hand, who he says he's breaking into all sorts of places and had been in a bunch of places, who was high on drugs, who probably doesn't have a memory of what the hell happened, who gets caught and incarcerated for several, similar things or similar crimes that would fit the bill of what happened here. We just ignore that. Instead, we go after the roommate. It makes no sense. And then on top of that, we have male DNA at the scene, present at the scene, unaccounted for, underneath their fingernails, which is exactly what would account for because she would have been struggling with this individual. Now, what we don't know and what we are unsure of is how did he get in the house? What we don't know is did he lock the door himself and run out? Did he come in and follow her behind her? We don't know. What we do know is that he may have, after this happened, in my opinion, what occurs is he's trying to get out and he doesn't want to go through the front door because he doesn't want to track stuff through the house potentially. And he panics and he cuts the screen and he goes out through it. And he tries to get out through it and he bursts through it. And that would explain potentially why some of these cobwebs and things weren't, because he's going out. He's not going in. So he's not disturbing anything. And he goes out. I mean, he could have walked. We don't know exactly what was going on. We don't know how he would have gained access to her. But what to me is pretty clear is that makes a lot more sense than the idea that for some unforeseen reason she buys a buffalo head knife that matches the guy who's on a crime spree across their community, takes that into the crime scene, and then decides, okay, I'm going to stab her, and that's what I'm going to do. It makes no sense. You don't go stabbing people over roommate stuff. I mean, it's really crazy. So Kate says, if Nichole had said that to the aunt, then why didn't the aunt report it immediately? I would be running to the police. Absolutely. Kelly Stevens says, not guilty, not enough evidence to connect Nichole. More on Devin Hall. Exactly. And Devin is the name. There it is. Kate, probably because NR also told her she had already been cleared. Well, Georgia Jasper says, I'm back and forth with this and that. I wouldn't be able to seal someone's face. Listen, that's the point, Georgia. That's the point, everyone. The whole point is this, is you have to believe beyond a reasonable doubt. One doubt exists in your mind. If you're debating it still, if there's a doubt in your mind, and there is no way in the world that a jury or a juror could go, in my opinion, and say that they don't have a doubt. The state has failed by a country mile to even come close to beyond a reasonable doubt. There's just no way. I mean, and again, I think this is going to be a rather quick verdict. I think we're going to have a verdict tonight. I think we'll have a verdict by 6:30, 7 o'clock. I think it's going to be not guilty because that's what needs to happen. Now, if this jury convicts her, it will be the biggest miscarriage of justice that we've seen in a long, long time, because this is a case that is unfit for conviction. And I know there will be some that think she's deserving of it, and that, due to her comments and her distasteful things that she said. And you know what? Look, that's not why we convict people. We convict people because the evidence is there, and the evidence is not there in this case. Okay, and listen, I think it's sad that the Knudsen family has had to live with this being unsolved. I think it's sad that they had to hear that the Monat or Minot, however you say it, the Minette Police Department was too busy to take care of their daughter's case. Again, what is utterly shocking to me is that you have these police officers who are talking about how concerned they were with the way this lady was acting. Okay, they have and that they said, "Oh, we're so concerned that we're going to sit on it for 15 years." That there were all these other cases. I mean, I would love, if I was them, I would be filing a lawsuit and I would be demanding to see what the cases were that were more important than solving a stabbing of an 18-year-old college student in an apartment. What could possibly be more? And that you would allow her roommate, who you believe was so callous and so devious in her actions and behavior, that you allowed her to walk free in your community for 15 years, ready to do this again. What are those cases? I want to see those cases. I want to know what case could possibly be there, because there's no possible way that there's a case that's more important than this case and solving this case. They didn't believe that they had the evidence to solve this case, and they were clearly lazy, and they were probably not fit to do the investigation. And clearly, by the first scene that we saw of this case, which was Attorney Sands talking about what was contained in this report that he received that none of the public has really seen, this 700 or whatever page report that they got from a company that did an audit on this, whatever was going on with this investigator that worked for this police department, an investigator on this case who was doing things to children that were not allowed. I mean, I think we've got our answers here, what the problem was with this case. And it was not, and it's absolutely not because they were busy. It's because this police department was incompetent and corrupt. Kelly Stevens says maybe she had animosity towards Anita. Doesn't mean Nichole left her parents at 4 a.m. to kill Anita. Maybe he was high and drunk. That's what I'm saying. I mean, this guy was out and about. He was prowling houses. He was breaking into houses. Right? What would the motive be of Nichole Rice's ex-boy? Okay, Katrina, let me explain something to you right here, and just to kind of give you a little perspective on what's going on with them. It's not what this is that they at the time, clearly whatever they heard at the time did not make them move. They did not go to the police. They did not go through hell or high water. They did not tell a bunch of people. They didn't go out and say, "Oh my God, she said this." They didn't even end their relationship with her. Remember, the one friend lived with her for a little while. The boyfriend got back together with her in 2017. Okay, what happens is they go back and they start looking at things, and they're remembering things in a different light. They're remembering things differently now, because they're, oh my God, what did she say? That what did she say? She said something about this. And then it becomes, well, and then you get somebody like this outfit that comes in, these two, and again, these are not people without their own scruples in their past as investigators. So we're not getting investigators who have a reputation. Well, the one guy, I don't think there's anything wrong, but there was one that was a prosecutor that had problems in Texas. So she comes in, they come in, and they got their own motives. So what they're doing is they're like, okay, she's not proven. There's a lot of things being said behind the scenes in these productions that's swaying these people. That's going after the memories. And the problem that you're having here is that when you have a memory like that, you need corroboration, and they don't have it. Just like the aunt who's on the stand making stuff up, on the stand discussing memories. And here's the problem with that: any memory she's talking about on the stand that's never been spoken before should be completely disregarded, because she's got memory problems. She had medical problems. She had a drug addiction. Her memories aren't better today. What she's doing is, with all of this, with the excitement of a trial, with her niece now being in jail, or not in jail, but now charged and sitting in front of the jury, her mind's going crazy. She's remembering all this stuff. Everything looks suspicious to her now. So it's not that they're like, "Oh, I'm out to get her." It's they probably genuinely believe the memories are real at this point. They probably genuinely do, but it doesn't mean they're real. And it doesn't mean they're accurate. And in fact, when you test the memory, which is important, when you test the memory and you test the facts within the memory, you don't just ignore the fact that she got it off with a year. You don't ignore the fact that the friend and her and everybody's saying white robe, it's a pink robe. Well, why is that? Because that's the story that's running. That means these people are watching each other's stuff. That means they're watching the documentaries. They all admitted to watching it. That means they're regurgitating. That means things are going on in their mind. They're hearing things. They're thinking things. That also means that whatever they heard Nichole say, Nichole could have been repeating rumor and innuendo, which is probably what was being said, what Nichole heard, because there was lots of rumors going on around this. Remember, these are the people that are at the heart. They might be talking to Marty Annell when she's moving out of her apartment. They're talking to people around town. People know she's involved in it. People are giving her information. So everything she's talking about doesn't mean it came because she's there. And clearly it wasn't accurate. At least the robe color wasn't. And then you've got the water by the sink. It sounds to me like she's regurgitating her own thoughts and her own theories based on what she saw. And these people at the time are looking to her like she's an expert and an insider because she was the roommate. But then when they start to think, oh my God, wait a minute. Oh, she knew that. Oh, she knew that. Oh my God, I thought it was just because holy cow. Oh, you mean, and then it all starts to evolve. But the problem is you don't base a whole case on that. And then when there's no DNA evidence, when there's no GPS evidence, there's nothing. You'd think that they would have gone back and tried to maybe get the phone evidence. Hey, was she there? Was she in the range? What time was it? What happened? But the problem is the text messaging and everything. I believe they said, if I'm not mistaken, it was 3 a.m. when those text messages stopped. And I believe they said she would have gone back to the apartment possibly around 1 a.m., which means she wouldn't have stayed there for long, which would mean potentially if Anita is in the bedroom, maybe the point of entry for Devin or Dylan, God, I keep butchering this poor guy's name. Let me get back and look here. But maybe that's the point of entry. Maybe she leaves the front door open. Maybe he slips in behind her. I mean, we don't know. But what we do know is that we don't know, right? The state is not allowed to convict somebody when there's questions, right? The only person in the room, like that's the funny part, right? The only people in the room that have to be sure are the prosecutors in a courtroom. It's the only place. Everywhere else we can speculate, we can argue, but when you go to the courtroom, that's what makes it special. And you swear in a jury, and you're a prosecutor, you have to know. There isn't no, I think I know. There isn't no, I think it's this. It is this. And we have evidence to prove it. And that any reasonable person that walks into this courtroom and views this evidence will not have a doubt. And if there is a doubt, if there is a question, if it still exists when we're done presenting this to you, then it's not guilty. And it's not guilty because you think she didn't do it. It's not guilty because you think she's innocent. It's not guilty because because the defense had to answer who actually did it. No, it's not guilty because there's one question. There's one question still remaining in your mind. That is the standard. And that is what this jury must evaluate this case against. And there is no way, if the jury does that, if the jury actually looks at this evidence in the correct frame of mind that they're supposed to be, that any juror could walk away and say there isn't a question still remaining. This is a case that just is far away from that. And there are a lot of cases that come to, and it's like, hey, there might be that one question or one doubt, and you're thinking to yourself, and it's all about how the jury interprets the evidence. If the jury decides to make a finding of fact. Now, on the other side of this, and this is what the state is depending on, at the end of the day, right, we talk about what it's supposed to be, right? And then we talk about what the state's actually asking the jury to do here. They're asking them to be deciders and finders of fact, and they're asking them to adopt the complete scenario that they have and to say, this is fact, this is fact, this is fact, this is fact. And of course, the judge tells them, you don't necessarily have to disregard a witness like I am and say, well, this witness was wrong about this, so everything's taken out. They're allowed to take a piece of this witness and a piece of this witness and a piece of this witness and say, these are the facts we find to be true. And all of this together is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's how innocent people get convicted. But in this case, that's exactly, I don't think we can say that. And I'm not saying that, but I really don't think she did this. And I certainly don't think there's any proof that exists beyond a reasonable doubt that she did this. and this is a case that most definitely should be being sent back out and should be reinvestigated. And maybe, maybe they blew their shot. But Kelly Stevens says too many unknowns, too many persons or interests, and not enough evidence on any of them. And definitely not Nichole. Anita definitely needs justice, but not by convicting someone with little to no evidence. I agree. I think that's wrong. That's wrong. Devin Hall is a most likely suspect than Nichole. Absolutely. And that's the problem. When you have two people that are still, when you have someone who is still a possibility, and he is still a possibility, that is the definition of a reasonable doubt. And that's why this case should be a not guilty verdict, without a doubt. Hopefully the next hour, maybe 2 hours, that they should be returning with a not guilty verdict and sending her home, and that's it. And I mean, if they need any evidence that she's not going to do anything, she hasn't done anything for 17 years. So there's not a fear that she's going to reoffend. It's not like, she thought she was cleared all the way up till, the TV show comes to town. So, I mean, nobody should be concerned she's going to go out and do this again, because she hasn't. I mean, and the fact that she's not some violent killer going out killing everyone. I mean, you didn't have witnesses that said, "Oh yeah, this lady's been a menace to society." No, we're going to believe that out of nowhere, over whatever the hell's going on in their house, that, oh yeah, she goes out, I guess, to a gas station somewhere, what the state wants you to believe, buys a folding knife, and says, "I'm going to kill her. That's what I'm going to do. We'll kill her." Makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. Whatsoever. And there's not one person that puts that knife in her hand. There's not one person that says she carried a folding knife. There's not one person that says, "Oh yeah, I saw her up at the farm, man. She was cutting the chicken wire with it." Nothing. Nothing. Nada. But there is witnesses that put that knife in the hand of a man who's going around doing the big R to multiple women, breaking into houses, burglarizing houses, who's arrested drunk next to a woman, who's a menace. Oh yeah, but the prosecution says, hey, ignore that, right? Cyber trucks have stuff falling off of it, right? It's just a coincidence. No, coincidences don't amount to proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And it is offensive that the prosecution in this case, and I agree with the defense on that. Listen, I thought the defense did a pretty good job. I felt like there were times they were a little unprepared. I did not like when they got up there with the process, and perhaps it was by design, but I really was disturbed and bothered when they got that lead investigator on, and they should have had everything ready to go to just hit her with cross-examination questions. And they should have had every document they needed, every document to refresh her memory with, everything lined up. I mean, they're sitting in a hotel, for Christ's sake. They knew she was coming on the witness stand. They've been waiting for her for days. They've had this report, and the fact that he didn't have his associates there who should have had a binder that was ready to go. They should have had this outlined and stepped through and known exactly. If she says X, we pull Y. If she does this, they go this. And they could have absolutely done that. And why that wasn't the case, I did not like that presentation at all. Now, maybe, like I said, as he alluded to in his closing, either it was truly by design to reflect to the jury, hey, look at all of this evidence. We're going through this. I'm painstakingly reviewing this report like you didn't do, detective. And maybe that's what he was trying to send the signal to, although I felt like that was missed and it did not reflect that way. Or he was covering up the fact that he knew he looked unprepared and he knew cameras were in the courtroom and he wanted to just give himself an excuse that he could then later say if he wins the case, or even if he loses the case, he could say, well, no, that was all part of the presentation. That was drama. That was what we were trying to make the jury believe here. Georgia Jasper says, why do y'all keep asking what their motive to lie is? That's concerning. Your evidence is because somebody said so and they have no motive to lie. That is disturbing because it doesn't matter. Like if they lied, right? And you don't believe people because they said this or said that. You believe people based on the credibility of what they're saying and how it matches up against evidence and how things corroborate what they said. And when you have old statements, years of old, and again, these are statements that were brought in under hearsay exceptions, under the exception being that these were said against. In other words, these shouldn't have technically come in, but the way they got in was because they were set against. If there's a hearsay exception, it's basically when you say something against your own interest. the court says that's allowed to come in. And that's because the idea is that why else would you be saying this? Nobody in their right mind would say something like this unless it's true. Now, the problem with that is the court's also very specific in saying you're allowed to challenge that, and the jury needs to look at that, and they need to really examine those statements and say, do they match up to the evidence? Is there other evidence? Standing on those statements alone, even the courts say, is concerning, because you should not make a case on those alone. So those statements alone are not going to cut it. They're just not. They were brought in as an exception to the hearsay rules, and they should not be relied upon solely. Now they can enhance other evidence. Now the other evidence they would say in this case was, of course, the one thing is the L cut, which they're saying is significant because it means the killer had to approach this from inside. Now, here's the problem they have. They don't have definitive evidence that she was inside. They do have her saying in her ever-changing statements where she was pressured to say at one point, well, I might have been inside. But again, there's no definitive evidence she was there. There's no text messages that show she was there. There's nothing. There's no witness that puts her in there. There's not Anita saying, oh, yeah, my roommate's in the other room and she just came in and what a bee she is. God, she's really bothering me. There's nothing there to say for certain. So that alone isn't enough even to say, okay, well, yeah, just because that V's there, she wasn't even there. In fact, the evidence suggests she was at a farm. So elsewhere. She woke up elsewhere. She has witnesses that place her there elsewhere the next morning. Not there, not at the apartment. She didn't walk past there, which I was thinking at one point. I was like, oh man, I hope they don't, that could be really bad for the defense if she's going to have to say she went to work in the morning. But then it came out, no, that's not what was going on. She's not a farm. She's elsewhere. She's down the road. She's got witnesses who are, backing that up. And so again, this evidence, these statements that everyone is placing so much on, these statements have to be tested, and they failed the test. They failed the test. Almost every single one of them failed the test in one way or another. The friends, they failed the test of reporting a statement like that. There was no report. There was no corroboration. In fact, there's a body of evidence to suggest, and I'm sure it'll be taken up on appellate court, that the very fact that there wasn't other people, most of the time, one of the tests in bringing in an old statement like that is you've got to suggest that these people told people about it. They don't even have people. There wasn't even people saying they heard it. There wasn't other people. There wasn't. Normally there's a police report or there's someone that says, yeah, this statement came in and she told me that Nichole said this. And she was so devastated and upset over it. And she couldn't believe it. That's the stuff normally that would come along with this. The judge let it in because there was nothing else. If the judge didn't let those statements in, if the hearsay doesn't come in, this case never makes it to a jury. It wouldn't make it. So Linda Tidwell says no one has brought up the fact that the victim locked her bedroom door. So according to the prosecutor, Nichole drove from her parents to kill the victim. She knows her bedroom door will be locked. That's exactly right. So why? Well, first of all, no one brings up the fact that what is the moment that drives her to drive to kill her? Where is the text message stream? Right? Let's take the Tim Harrington case, right? Which he ends up with a mistrial because one juror said they didn't have a body, right? And in my opinion, I thought that was going to be conviction, right? I mean, I was shocked when I came in because they have text messages on Snapchat leading all the way up to the moment that this guy walks up to his front door. They're fighting, they're arguing, and then the guy disappears. Never hear from him again. And then Tim Harrington's out with the box truck, driving all around, doing all these things, right? And it's all there, right? Because when it's all happening, and in crimes like this, it's not a premeditated thing that everyone's covering up your communication. This is something that came out of an argument. It came out of, we'd almost say, in a way, a heat of passion, But then this violent act occurs, and then things happen within that violent act, and then you got to classify it, right? But it all comes out of anger. It all comes out of an argument. So there's normally evidence leading up to it that is present that suggests why the person walks up to why she goes back to the house and says, tonight's the night, I'm killing you. Or why she would just stop at a gas station and say, tonight's the night, I'm grabbing that knife. But we're to believe that she's going to do this that night of all nights when she's at home for the weekend and she comes back and she drives back home knowing her door's locked, I guess, comes into the house and just says, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna stab you. I'm gonna take you out." I mean, what? It'd be more believable if this was the night they were both at home, right? Nobody could come through the door's locked, and they confirm all of that. It's a Thursday night, and then Nichole went to work, and then she had to walk past the window. I mean, that would be definitive evidence that would say, okay, Nichole, how do you explain it? She says, well, it had to be someone else. How did you not hear? How were you not aware of these things, right? That's not what happened here, right? She wasn't even supposed to be home. She wasn't home by all means. Allegedly, she came back and picked up some clothes and then went to her farm. But we know she woke up that next day at her farm where she said she was. We know because her parents said she was there. And, where is it? I mean, like I said, this is just crazy. So Kate says the DNA is the part that got me. That's a huge piece of evidence. Well, it's not really that huge. Well, actually, hold on. Let me ask you this. What, Kate, and again, I know this is late because this was like 22 minutes ago. I'm way behind on the comments. What part of the DNA are you talking about? Are you talking about the DNA in the L of the screen, or are you talking about the male DNA? Let me know. Kelly Stevens, I don't believe Nichole did this. She's being blamed for some teenage arguments that they're using as a motive. What about Devin, who has B&E homes, maybe high? Exactly. Listen, this is eerily similar to the Amanda Knox case. In fact, Amanda Knox, I believe she was into some activism work. If there was a case that she should be commenting on, getting involved in, and adding her opinion to, this would be one, because she has experience in this. And in fact, what would have been just an absolute checkmate move, in my opinion, would have been to have her come in and testify as an expert in wrongful convictions. And she at least had the defense attempt to get her certified as an expert because she went through this. She knows she's in almost similar circumstances. She had a roommate she didn't get along with. She was having problems with that roommate. She gets accused. There's, DNA being used to allegedly, in a weird way. In this case, it's the DNA in the L of the screen, even though it's a screen that we're not even certain was in the window completely. Because in order to explain why Marty Yanell doesn't see the body in the room, the screen has to be out of the window. But if you put the screen in the window, then it becomes, well, why the hell did he not look at the body? Why would you not be knocking on the door? You're going to be sitting there maneuvering your screen out of a young girl's bedroom window while it's open, and you're not going to think to be like, hey, ma'am, are you in there? Hello? Why is there blood on your screen? What's going on? No, he doesn't do that. He doesn't leave a notice. He doesn't put something on the door. He doesn't go get the property manager and say, hey, hon, I found a bloody screen here and the window's open over here and she's not answering. Maybe we should look into this. No. What does he do? He takes the screen and puts it in there. The only way you explain that is that screen is not in that window. That screen is on the ground. He picks it up, he takes it, and that explains what has weighed heavily on Marty's mind, and that is the lack of action at that moment. That he feels like if he would have walked over and investigated where that screen came from and not just have been a lazy ass and taken it into the shop and put it over there and then mentioned it, that he might have been able to save that young girl's life. That makes more sense than Marty being a suspect. I don't think Marty did this. I don't think he did. Even though I think they're, the screen thing, but again, it makes no sense. And it certainly would make no sense that Nichole would even think to be like, let me pull the screen out, right? You're not going to do that. Like that just doesn't make any sense. And what we know is somebody messed with that screen and the police are trying to say whatever cobwebs and there was this. Listen, it happens. He kicks through the screen to get out the window. This is a dude who's all drugged up. He's just killed this girl and he just wants to get the hell away. So he knocks the screen out of the window and he goes running down the street, which a witness saw. And there you have it. I mean, the case is wrapped up. The case is wrapped up. And then we said, Georgia Jasper says, what about? Because her DNA was on the murder weapon. Her cell phone places her there. She had a cut on her hand. Her fingerprint was on the window. Which case are we talking about? Are you talking about the Amanda Knox case? Because I don't that is not this case. Or her hair was on the bathrobe. Roughneck 8403. Minot. Oh, that's how you say it. Okay, I got you. And Alex Machado says there are rumors her dad paid people off. Minot PD was corrupt as hell. Her dad should have been on the stand. Okay, all right. Well, I mean, all those things were not presented at trial. Obviously, we can't comment on that. If that's stuff that was going on, you think the prosecutors would have put them on the stand. If they could prove that somebody was paying someone off, you'd think they would put them on the stand. I've said a lot of unsavory things about my ex-mother-in-law. She's still alive, and I will still be saying unsavory things about her after she dies. Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Those are not things that prove anything beyond prove that she did anything. Stephanie Fisher says, I'm convinced Nichole is responsible. However, the defense attorney is charismatic in a way that will help them believe that there is doubt. His aggressive and naturally defensive style. Stephanie Fisher, the doubts raised in this case go far beyond the charismatic personality of the defense attorney. While I do agree with you, he was very charismatic, but he actually was charismatic and had some reasonable doubt to argue to the jury. The state just did not meet the burden in this case. And Stephanie, please explain to me, what is it about, what evidence in this case do you believe proves beyond a reasonable doubt? I'm not saying that that it would be wrong to consider her a suspect, or even to say she's an uncleared suspect at this point. But to say that she did this beyond a reasonable doubt over Hall, how would you say that? There's just no way. Nichole had DNA on a knife. I know very little about this case. I'm deep in the Cementilli one, but I thought unknown. No, yeah, that's correct. Nichole did not have Nichole's DNA was not found anywhere near that scene. So I believe that might have been civil psych. I think that might have been being talked about when I brought up the Amanda Knox case, potentially, because that is not this case. She had no DNA on anywhere. The only DNA found on the knife was Anita's. The only DNA that was conclusively found anywhere was Anita's. There was a male DNA characteristic that was found, but it was unfortunately unable to be, it was not a large enough sample size to be able to be matched to anyone. They could only develop the profile as male. So it wasn't, so I think what the defense was alluding to was saying that they were not able to eliminate anyone because the male DNA was not enough to be tested against anyone to conclusively rule anyone out or rule anyone in. And that's what the DNA expert said. Alex Machado says, I've known Nichole for many years. The only people that know her know she has a quick fuse when it comes to anger. She is more than capable. Well, Alex, I understand. Maybe she's more than capable. But here's the problem, Alex. What was the fuse? What lit the fuse? What puts her there with her that night in the apartment? Did you know? And maybe you can answer this question. Maybe you should have been on the stand. Did you know Nichole to carry around folding knives? Do you know if she had a reputation for carrying around folding knives? Because the biggest problem in this case, in my opinion, was the lack of ability to put the folding knife anywhere near her, and the fact that the folding knife matched and was admitted to match a man who's going around committing breaking and entry, committing B&Es and big R's and victimizing women all over that community, and is caught for it. Is not just suspected of it, but caught for it, charged with crimes relating those things. That's just too big of a coincidence for me to say, hey, yeah. I mean, maybe Nichole had a huge temper. Maybe she had a temperament that wasn't great. But guess what? Here's the thing. That doesn't mean that temper is going to lead her to go stab a roommate. That's a pretty big jump. I mean, that's a pretty big jump. Maybe punch her roommate. Maybe we're not talking, if she was being charged with that there was some sort of assault that led to Anita hitting her head or something, that would be that might make sense. But this is a little more than that. Civil Psych says, what is the physical evidence against her? Anything besides bad? That's exactly right. There is none. Kate says, at Alex, when I was younger, I had an awful temper, but not once did I ever harm anyone. Having a temper doesn't mean you have it in you to take someone's life. That's right. That's a far different thing. Well, all it takes is one time, Alex. That is correct. But the point is, there's we need to see the evidence that she was the one that did this, and there isn't any. Right? One time means when you lose your temper, we have to believe that she's going to have had something left behind there. And again, where's her DNA on the screen? Where's her DNA on the knife? Where's her DNA anywhere on the scene? There's none. Where is it under the nails, which is where this male DNA was found at? Wish fulfilled state says, I'm afraid she's going to. Why are you afraid? Wish fulfilled state. This is what's supposed to happen when the state comes with a bad case. This is why I think it's funny. Everybody gets mad that a defendant walks, and they get mad and they act like the justice system is blamed. No, the justice system worked. This is justice, believe it or not, because justice is the process that reviews a case like this and says it didn't meet the standards, and everyone should cheer it, because what it means is it makes the system get better, right? Try to put this in my boys. When we make a mistake, when we fail, we learn from it, right? Now, when we let the police get away with blaming the justice system or claiming it was a loophole, the system doesn't get better. The system gets better when we look at this case and we realize, how did we get here? Either A person that was guilty walked because something was missed or the case wasn't as airtight as they thought it should be. Let's figure that out. Or B, they went after the wrong person. And how did it lead to that? Who did what? Who missed what? Who ignored what? And how did we get here? And that's what's more important to walk out of this case with as she walks. It's not to say, oh, she got away with it. That's the wrong approach, because the process worked. Now we look at what it tells us. We look at the result and what that tells us. And just like if she gets convicted, we're going to do that, right? There's an appeal process. And I believe there should be that process even in an acquittal. But there should be a review, appellate review of the process, because there's things that are left when you have a not guilty verdict. There are questions, there are things, there are investigations that should be done. The case shouldn't just end there. It should be required to move on. It should be assigned different investigators, and there should be a report that has to be issued by the state attorney's office on exactly where they went wrong, and that should be given to the family, and that is how it should be solved. And it's either this is what we found and we think we had the right person all along, so this case will be closed. It will be closed with a not guilty, but this is why we believe the not guilty occurred. This is what these were the doubts that were raised. This is what we looked into. Or B, we looked into it and we acknowledge, hey, we made a mistake here, and these are how we got here, and these are the things we did to correct these things, and this is what we're going to do to rectify. We're going to go after another person. We're going to go charge this other person. We're going to go do this. That's what should be happening here, not attacking the defense attorney for doing a good job of raising doubt in a case that was riddled with reasonable doubt. And maybe we don't like that guy because of his attitude, but I didn't like the way the prosecutor acted this morning. I didn't like the way he ended his cross-examination of that witness by asking him if he was going to put this, what a self-aggrandizing question. Are you going to put this up? Well, maybe he should, because you know what? I don't think that guy did a terrible investigation in this case. He raised a lot of good things. And, he did a hell of a better job than the lady who was more worried about probably covering up the affair she were having than actually investigating the case, and that actually took the time to read the report and to say, no, I didn't read the report. And you're going to sit here and tell me, oh, sorry, that's why we have two investigators. No, what? You got to be aware of the entire case file and all the evidence. How are you supposed to make conclusions? How are you supposed to figure out your case? You're meeting with that other investigator, I would hope, but you've also got to be aware of everything that's going on, because it's the entirety of that file that drives your investigation. When you're unaware of half of your investigation, that's how we end up in the place that we're at right now. I mean, that was just some insanity talk right there. Sorry, guys, I hit the wrong button. I was trying to click on a comment and I clicked into the courtroom. So nothing going on right now that I can tell from the courtroom. In the courtroom perspective, jury is still deliberating. I think we'll have a verdict today, but I'm not certain. Bridget says, I'm shocked that the defense didn't bring in any witnesses to corroborate her whereabouts during the ever-changing timeline the defendant provided. Well, here's the thing, Bridget. I think the defense, listen, I was a little concerned as well, because I think the defense should have brought in some stuff. I think they should have brought in more. And I think they should have really just, I know there are cases where you say, okay, I'm going to rest on the burden of the prosecution. Problem was, they didn't talk about the burden of the prosecution that much, in my opinion, when you're doing that. They just talked about, this is a garbage case and we're leaving it at that. I feel like they should have done, if they were going to do what they did in the way they went in there and just absolutely say this is a garbage case, it should have never been brought. They should have went forward and they should have called Devin to the stand, and they should have went. And I thought they were going to call Marty Yanell's best friend to the stand, the heavy in the heart, statements. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't need to do that, but I was under the impression they might do that. I think they should have brought witnesses that would have said, "Hey, I've never seen Nichole with a folding knife before. Never saw that she had anything like that on her." I think that would have been good. But you know what? The problem with it, the problem is that all of that invites other stuff to come in. And then it also invites the jury to start seeing that you're trying to prove something. So then the jury loses sight of the fact that the defense has no burden of proof, that it is the state that has to prove everything. So I think the defense looked at it as, we brought in our expert. The expert literally got to have what I thought was kind of somewhat of an unprecedented discussion with the jury, saying, giving them the roadmap to the reasonable doubts in the case, and said, "Hey, we get to end it right here. And then we're going to end it with this expert. We're going to walk you through the reasonable doubts. We're going to close on it. So we're going to have an expert tell you. And then on the same day, we're going to get the close on that day." So I think they looked at it as like, this is the way we want the case to end, because they didn't leave the prosecution with much to rebut. So I'm not 100% shocked that they did what they did. I feel like it might have been, I was hoping we were going to see more. I'm damn glad they didn't put her on the witness stand. That would have been the stupidest move of all time. So that I'm glad about. But I think the defense did a good job in this case. I mean, besides what I thought was the appearance of being unprepared with a couple of witnesses and unable to find things in what I thought should have been, they should have already had these things. These were not complicated witnesses. These were not like cementilli witnesses that went on for days. And you see in that, the defense gets up and they're ready. They're hammering, bam, bam, bam. And this is talking about days of, and some of these witnesses in the cementilli case have had days of direct or days of cross. And those attorneys are ready to go. I just didn't like it. But again, I cannot say that it wasn't, we can't rule out, just like we can't say beyond a reasonable doubt that this wasn't by design, because there was an inference by the defense attorney that was by design. All right, I'm going to take one more. I've got to step out again. I'm going to try to go through here. Let's just see here. All right, let's pick up here. I haven't got a chance to put Lieutenant Dan up. So Lieutenant Dan says, the defense attorney is a scumbag. I'm watching this back, and his attacks on the prosecutor, making fun of a witness's glasses. Who does that? A desperate attorney. Well, Lieutenant Dan, no, I think you have to look at the context of him doing that. Who takes a case to trial with these type of witnesses? Okay. These prosecutors should have never taken this case to trial. And the fact that, and again, remember, every attorney who's in that courtroom has a responsibility to the truth. And they have a responsibility when they know something isn't true, or if a case it shouldn't be brought. There's their responsibility to not go forward with that case, to not go forward and bring a case that shouldn't have been brought. In this case, should never have been brought. So what you saw from him, it's perspectives. Piers, Lieutenant Dan, you're coming from the perspective that you liked the prosecution's case and felt it was a good case. So you're going to take offense to that. Anybody out there who looks at this case, and I'm one of them, I'll admit it, who says this case sucked, this should never have been brought, I understand what he's saying. And then I think the witness he pulled out, I felt kind of the same way. I mean, you bring this woman in, she looked like somebody out of, what was it, in Better Call Saul? Remember the brother who had the light? If some of you might have watched that, who had the light sensitivity. I mean, this lady comes in with her damn hat, her sunglasses, and all that stuff. I mean, it looked ridiculous, but I think it was really, and then she's sitting here saying apparently things we couldn't even appreciate how ridiculous they were, which was that allegedly she was made to sleep in the barn of her parents' house, and that they made her go clean the crime scene up or whatever, which was, things that the defense attorney obviously had a knowledge about, things that we didn't have. So for him, he's listening to this lady's testimony. He's thinking, this lady doesn't, she didn't know what the hell was going on. She couldn't even name where they worked. She couldn't tell what year they worked together. She didn't know any of it, but she's claiming to remember all these things crystal clear. And then the things she's remembering are just so absolutely off the wall that it goes along with her ensemble that she comes into the courtroom. Of course, do remember as well how she arrived at the courtroom. She delayed court for nearly 30 minutes because she was lost trying to find the courthouse. And they had to send out the witness coordinator to go get her. So, I mean, I think that was just indicative and just an example of the pure asinineness of the state's case. Their witnesses what they were relying upon. And I think it is absolutely disturbing. And those prosecutors should be ashamed of themselves to put on a case like this, to put a case before the jury, because what they're having to do is twist things. They're having to twist the evidence. They're having to stand up there and they're having to make arguments to the jury that are not in good faith. They're trying to win a case. They're not arguing good evidence. They're not arguing a good case. This is one of those situations where these prosecutors say, man, and I've heard this from prosecutors say to themselves, one of the things that's a sign that they're a good attorney or good prosecutors, if you can convict an innocent person, right? You can take any fact and make it. And some will say, hey, especially if there's plea bargaining discussions going on, where, they might say, well, listen, I take that to a jury. I'll make it sound how it sounds. I'll take an argument. A lot of people don't understand the power of what they're trying to do in the closing arguments. That's why I found it funny when the ASAP Relly, I think it was the ASAP case, there was recently a prosecutor that was just complaining up and down that the defense was, about what the defense was saying in their closing. Yet, and then the prosecutor went back and very liberally were taking much liberation with their own facts and what they were telling the jury. And the idea is that, look, what the attorneys are telling the jury is not evidence, and they rely on that. And many judges let prosecutors go way off the rails, and they give them the instruction, the admonishment. What they're saying isn't evidence, and it's like a prosecutor that knows how to use that can run the distance on it. They can, as my dad used to say, not just run through the door, but kick the door and just keep running until the judge stops you. And then when the judge does stop you, the jury's heard all of it, and the judge is just going to say, well, now here's an admonishment that what the attorneys are saying isn't evidence. It's not evidence, but it's certainly telling the jury how to interpret that evidence. And guess what? Because a lot of jurors aren't taking notes, and some courts don't even allow jurors to take notes, how the prosecutor tells them to remember the evidence certainly plays into the memory they're going to have of the evidence and what they believe the evidence to be. So it's very, very powerful tool. And in this case, that is what the prosecutor is hoping to do here, is twist, turn, and tell them something like the deadbolt. Like that. She's hoping that there's going to be a juror back there say, see, that's it. Yeah. Remember, what's her name heard the deadbolt loud. That means that door was deadbolted. That means there was no one, only someone would keep. Well, yeah, somebody had to deadbolt it, which she's saying, oh, that's muscle memory. So who left that door? That had to be her. Boom. And since the window could have only been entered, whoever left had to have already done this. And they had to have keys to the apartment. And they couldn't have deadbolted the door. Well, not necessarily completely true. Okay. Because it's also possible that Anita, right, deadbolted the door because she let someone in, or she brought someone to the house, or someone came in and she didn't know they were there, or someone snuck in and they didn't know they were there, or someone left the door open and then they deadbolt the door before they go do whatever they're going to do. And then Anita has the door open because she went to the bathroom, and then that person's hiding in the bedroom. And then she goes in and she shuts her door, or the door was open, right? Because I think that's what her dad said. So she goes in and comes out of the bathroom, and this guy goes after her, and they get in a struggle, and he tries to hold the knife to her, and she resists, and he stabs her twice. And then he goes, oh my God, I gotta get the hell out of here. Shit, I just killed somebody. And he goes over and he tries to, get the screen. Now they're saying that the screen had to be cut from the outside, right? But you know what? I don't think there's really any way to say for certain how it was cut or what was going on. Unless he was trying to, so I don't know. We don't know. But that's of course the implication. And he goes through and boom. Or maybe he tried to cut the screen, or he comes back, or whatever. I mean, again, that's the implication. So I think that's going to be, if she gets convicted, and we'll roll back to that. If she gets convicted, I think that there's going to be the acceptance of that. That's what the prosecutor is going to have argued to this jury, is going to say, someone's going to say the door was deadbolted. The screen could have only been cut from the outside. And somebody says, well, he kicked the screen and well, he couldn't have done that. And then they're going to say, well, we don't care where the knife came from. The knife had to come from her. It's not our job to figure out where it came from. It's just our job to say it was there. And that's true, right? They're only deciding who killed her. I mean, it is a potential doubt that can be raised, but the jury can dispel it and say, well, she could have had it. She could have had that. She could have had that because her dad gave it to her. She could have had this. It could have just been a coincidence. But all we know is whoever did this had to have been inside the house. And there you have it. Now, for me, I believe, that this was a scenario to where he kicks the screen out. He's trying to put it up and he cuts it from the outside because he's trying to get it in and he's trying to close the window. He can't get it up. He just throws the screen and he leaves. That's a possibility. To me, that makes more sense that would align with why that screen would have gotten cut, because he was trying to put it back in. So he thought, well, I'll cut the screen and try to get my hand in there to try to get the screen to fit it. And then realizes as he gets the screen up, and this is what I'm thinking, he tries to get the screen up. So he's trying to get his hand in there to close the window, because he doesn't close the window before he puts the screen back up, because he kicks the screen out. So he puts it up and he cuts it. And that's why it was cut in a way that says, well, it doesn't really make sense someone was coming through. So he's cutting the screen to try to get his hand through to bring the window down. Can't do it. And then just ends up throwing the screen on the ground because maybe he sees somebody or hears somebody or says, I just got to get the hell out of here. I can't figure this shit out, and leaves and runs and out he goes. And that's as likely to me as it is, makes a hell of a lot more sense than the idea that she's going to do all of this and think, oh yeah, let me set this up and let me cut this screen and let me do all the, like, what? That makes no sense at all. Makes no damn sense. No sense. So, that's where we stand on this. So hopefully, my prediction is, I hope we'll have a verdict by 7, which would be 6 o'clock their time. Now, maybe, I don't know if this judge is going to let them deliberate late. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know what their terms are. I know, like, for instance, the when we were dealing with the Levesque trial, the judge, it was a hard stop at 4. It didn't matter. So perhaps that'll be the case. That'll be the case in this case. But anyways, I've got to jump off here. I will be back, to talk about it if a verdict comes in, or at least I'll try to, depending, especially if it's a guilty verdict, because I want to definitely get my 2 cents in and say exactly how I feel about that guilty verdict. But I'll also talk about if it's not guilty, because I think the system definitely worked here, because this case is not one that deserves a guilty verdict. Absolutely not. There's too much doubt. There's too many problems. There are too many questions. This case needs to be rejected by the jury. It needs to be sent back out, and there needs to be, again, whatever they're doing down there with that police department that was responsible for this investigation. They need to go down there and they need to add this to the list of things that need to be reviewed and needs to be improved. That's my perspective. Anyways, I'm going to send this back to the courtroom, guys. I appreciate everyone that's watching. I appreciate all the members that have showed up in the chat. I appreciate everybody that's shown up from the Simontilli case, even though we're on a break. I'm going to continue. I have a whole slew of things to put out to keep us watching for the Simontilli case. I finally got done with the no break editions, and we're going to be, for the next 2 days, we're going to be getting the backlog of Simontilli testimony back out, so everybody is up to speed on that as we move towards the conclusion of that case. So we'll see. And it's 12:27, 21:27 there. So I guess what is that? 9 o'clock, I guess. Yeah. I think, yeah, 9 o'clock. So yeah, you're if it comes out at 7, then what would that be? That would be about 11 for you. So hopefully it doesn't go much later than that, Kate. But again, they could cut for today, because remember, there's an hour. They are an hour behind where I'm at. So right now it's only 4:28. So I would imagine at about 6, we'll find out whether or not they're going to be going into the evening for deliberations, or if the judge is going to say, look, go home, get some rest. And I am quite certain we'll have a verdict tomorrow. If the judge were to send them home, there's just no way in the world I could think that they wouldn't. But anyways, in the meantime, guys, keep checking back. We will have the verdict when it comes out, and very much appreciate everyone, and I'll be talking to everybody soon. Justice Watchers, before we begin, I want to make this absolutely clear. The following broadcast contains public domain courtroom footage commentary, and legal analysis. This content is presented under the fair use doctrine as defined by 17 USC 107 and is protected by multiple Supreme Court rulings, which you see below. This stream is transformative, educational, and journalistic in nature. It includes original commentary, trial breakdowns, legal interpretation, and critical analysis, not raw redistribution. We do not claim ownership over any public domain footage, and all use is strictly within legal bounds. If you're watching this content, you're engaging in a protected, transformative experience, grounded in law, never in speculation. And if anyone has a problem with that, take it up with Campbell, Brady, Miranda, and Irvin. Remember, guys, justice always works better when we watch. So keep watching.